Because of the way this season has started. 1-5 out of the gate here. A mess all across the board, John. But the positives and the negatives for the Philadelphia Phillies.
The positive is that none of these games were at home, so that no one could burn the stadium down. I mean, and this is the thing we talk about, where it's like you don't want to overreact to 1 week of baseball, especially like when it comes to a Phillies team where, look, 2 of their losses were because Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler got their brains beat in. Is that something you expect to continue for the entirety of the season? Barring something that none of us understand or know about? No. Those 2 guys will be fine. They just happen to have 2 bad starts right next to one another at the beginning of the season. You know, I'm more concerned about stuff like, you know, the fact that they lost Rhys Hoskins so late in spring training, no real ability to replace him. The first attempt that they tried with Derek Hall not only didn't work, but Hall... I mean, I shouldn't say it didn't work. It's only been like 6 games, but he is now hurt, and the Phillies are going to have to go to someone else. They're calling up Cody Clemens. I cannot imagine Cody Clemens is actually going to get any level of long run, but the first base is going to continue to be an issue for this team until and unless they find a suitable replacement for Hoskins. I don't think it's going to be Derek Hall or however. I like hearing in my head as Derek Hall, but... Either way, that was already going to be a problem for them. And I do wonder how much of this, too, is a combination of kind of World Series hangover and also just the sheer negative just heaviness of, man, we lost our starting first baseman like 2 days before the season started. That's a rough one to come back from psychically. That clubhouse probably is not the most joyful place in that regard. Yeah. But some of this, too, is just going to be a matter of, like, you know, again, as with the Dodgers, as with so many other teams, what are you going to get out of your non-star performers? And for the Phillies, that was already going to be asking a lot with Bryce Harper down. It's asking all that much more with Rhys Hoskins down. You know, you have to see now, obviously, what can you get out of first base? You're hoping you can get more out of, you know, Nick Castellanos in right field. Or, you know, whoever it happens to be in right field.
I mean, he's been bad. That's something to monitor. He's not good out of the gate. That outfield looks like if Kyle Schwarber has a down year and that, like, he doesn't have the kind of year that he had last year and Bryce Harper obviously not being there, you're like, I don't know, man. This is one of this is a pretty ugly outfield, and then you already have the first base hole.
And that's something we talked about last season, too, when Harper initially hurt his elbow and basically had to spend the rest of the year DHing, was that this outfield defensively stinks.
Yeah.
You know, it's very bad because of Schwarber and Castellanos in the corners, and it's, you know, it's something you can live with that Castellanos is hitting. It's completely untenable if he's not. And I think you're right that Castellanos is probably the Phillies hitter we need to pay the most attention to for the course of April, because if he gets off to another slow start, or if it's clear that, you know, he's lost something bat speed wise, you know, in terms of being able to hit fastballs, in terms of being able to hit whatever it is he's you know, trying to do, the Phillies are in for a bad time. They cannot really, that lineup is so thinned out right now with Harper and Hoskins both down. They cannot really make do with Castellanos being a total non-entity as well, you know. That Phillies team got where it got last year because it had Harper and Hoskins all year. And even though they weren't MVPs by any stretch, they were still way better than what the Phillies could have run out otherwise. Something similar, I think, is the lack of position player depth right now, which is really kind of hurting the Phillies. I think when you look at, you know, granted, Christian Pache, the lamented former Brave, as good an option as you could ask for in terms of a guy to step into center field and hold a glove for like 2 innings at the end of a game.
Yeah.
But not really the guy you want to be your primary backup outfielder, because he just cannot hit, you know?
Sad.
And it makes you question whether or not the trade where Philadelphia sent Matt Vierling and Phil Maton to the Tigers for Gregory Soto, I think everyone more or less thought it was a pretty good deal at the time. The Phillies needed some bullpen depth, you know, and very clearly, you know, I think the gamble on Craig Kimbrell has not really looked very good so far. I can understand the desire for Soto, but they really did sacrifice some really useful bench depth in that deal, and I think that's already starting to come back to bite them a bit.
Well, that's why you draft Mickey Moniak #1 overall for these type of scenarios.
And I think this is also the thing where, again, like, the Phillies' depth has just been impacted by the fact that they just have not done a good job drafting and developing players in the last 5 or so years. And I think that's where something like, you know, when you do have a success like Vierling, you know, ideally, you trade that. Maybe you trade that guy to help you somewhere else. But I think in retrospect, you know, I do wonder if Dave Dombrowski's thinking, man, I kind of wish I'd actually held on to my right-handed hitting backup outfielder who could play center field and actually knew what to do when holding the bat, as opposed to we have to roster Christian Pache all year now, or otherwise we're going to lose him again. or we're going to lose him. Which, I mean, I don't know if
You
Christian
know what's
Pache
happening
even
right
makes it
now?
through
Dom
April,
is calling Colorado over and over again. He's like, all right, I understand Chris is loving the vibes. But like Bryce needs him. I need him. He needs to play a corner outfield spot for us. Like it just has to happen.
No way Chris Bryant wants to go to Philadelphia and deal with any of that. He made himself pretty clear when he decided to take Colorado's money that he was just done with.
But like, I just imagine Bryce is like, come on, man. Come on.
Yeah, the Vegas to Vegas connection.
Yeah, like
then they got to go after Joey Gallo in Minnesota and make it ultimate.
I don't know. I look, Dombrowski is one of my favorite GMs of the last 20 years because he's just such a different kind of general manager, and he's obviously had a lot of success. He's also just blown up franchises for the long term with his strategy, but I like it because it's different.
Look, you don't hire Dave Dombrowski unless you're going to spend money and destroy your farm system.
Correct.
You know what you're getting in that exchange.
Phillies aren't developing. So it's like I am very curious to see what he does if this slow start continues into June because at least he's not going to be patient. They're going to do some other big thing.
And for you can argue the Phillies are developing on the pitching side with Andrew Painter and Mick Abel and Griff McGarry, but obviously with Painter down for indefinitely, at least with that elbow sprain, that was one of the big potential depth pieces that the Phillies were ideally looking to add at some point during the season was one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. Yeah. That's probably not going to be the case this season, or at very least not until late in the season. So I think you're right, though. I think Dombrowski is not a guy to sit on his hands if things aren't working, and I think that, again, a team to keep a very close eye on, because the other part of this, too, is that with Atlanta off to a hot start, and with the Mets obviously being a talented team, and with the Marlins being there present, and at the very least...
I mean, just, come on, folks. Like, this is not keeping up with the Marlins. Like,
but I think that the Phillies really, I didn't pick them to win the East, and I don't expect them to win the East, but at the same time, like, they can't let themselves fall too far back in that division, because they don't want to be in a position where you have to win a wild card to make the postseason. I think that was already going to be the case for them.
Yeah.
But I don't think you want to have to accept that by Mother's Day, that you have already put yourself into. Well, we've lost the division,
Well, the season's over, just like the Family Guy gif. Last big national thing, John. The Rays 6-0 now.
Yes.
Like just really bonker stuff. So they obviously carved up the Red Sox. Rays have outscored their opponents. I saw this on Twitter. 27-5 in their first 4 games. So that was how the Bo Sox staff allowed 30 runs in those 4 games.
Oh wait, the Rays played Detroit to start the season.
Okay, Detroit.
A very bad Tigers team.
There you go. And then Rays baseball has played 5 games, or this was the tweet yesterday. They played 5 games this year. They have won all 5 by at least 4 runs. The only other team in MLB history with a streak that long to begin a season was the St. Louis Maroons in 1884, and they did it 13 straight. I mean, the Rays are, we can play the tape. I had the Rays winning the AL East before the year, where I'm like, this is a classic bounce back Rays, where everyone's going to talk themselves into the Blue Jays and the Yankees and, hey, the Orioles. And then you saw a little bit of that buzz of like, are we sure the Red Sox might just not over...